Welcome to Meet the Candidates, a forum for candidates running in the November 8th general election. This segment of the forum is for representative in House District 31B. I'm Carrie Lund, Executive Director for our Ham Lake Area Chamber of Commerce, who co-sponsors Meet the Candidates with the Anoka, Blaine, Coon Rapids Area League of Women Voters. All candidates were invited to this forum. The Chamber of Commerce and League of Women Voters do not support or oppose any political parties or candidates for office. The League does help citizens become informed voters and advocates for important issues. This is what this evening is about, informing voters. If you are interested in the League, visit their webpage, lwvabcmn.org. Women, men, and young people are invited to join. The views expressed in each forum are those of the candidates, not those of the League of Women Voters or of the Chamber. LWV posts complete, unedited recordings of the forums. Editing is authorized only for official media reporting. Excerpts or edited clips of candidate forums may not be used for partisan or political purposes. The candidates will answer 2 introductory questions, which they received in advance, followed by questions submitted by the public via our website, and questions of importance to the Chamber of Commerce and the League of Women Voters. We'll end with the closing statements. Answers are limited to 90 seconds for each of the 2 introductory statements, or introductory questions, and 1 minute for each of the other questions. Candidates will take turns being the first to answer a question. Bruce Pomerantz is our moderator for this evening.
Thank you, Ms. Lund, I'm honored for the trust to moderate this forum fairly. To those in the audience and viewing this online, please note that I live in Fridley and cannot vote in House District 31B, and I am not acquainted with either candidate or knowingly with their friends, supporters, or opponents. I will alternate between the 2 candidates with regard to the order they respond to the questions. Now I'm going to ask Ms. Scott for the first question, which she received earlier, as did Mr. Fisher. What is your motivation to run for this office, and what experience or knowledge would help you serve effectively?
Well, thank you for the question, and thank you to the sponsors of the forum this evening. My motivation for running is one of service to community and state. I want to make Minnesota a more affordable place for families and businesses to thrive. This means giving back the surplus to those that contributed to it by reducing taxes, starting with the Social Security tax, so that folks can afford to put food on the table and gas in their cars in this time of high Walls-Biden inflation. Secondly, we must return ourselves to safe streets. We must not forget that Governor Walz and the DFL-led city leaders of Minneapolis let that city burn, including the 3rd Police Precinct. All of this started a crime spree that has made our streets less safe. Thirdly, we need to catch up our kids for nearly 2 years of learning loss, thanks to the COVID shutdown that Governor Walz and the DFL instituted. My experience as a small business owner, mom, 26-year resident of the area, and current legislator who listens, acts, and leads has equipped me to represent you. I'm Peggy Scott. I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Mr. Fisher, what is your motivation to run for this office, and what experience or knowledge would help you to serve effectively?
Good evening. First of all, I'd like to thank the Ham Lake Chamber of Commerce, the Anoka County League of Women Voters for hosting tonight's candidate forum. The fundamental right for all eligible voters to cast their vote is the foundation for our representative democracy, and I appreciate the League's efforts to promote that. My multi-generational family moved from Blaine to East Bethel at the beginning of the pandemic 2 years ago to a spot that we fell in love with that puts nature at our backyard, easy access to the Twin Cities if needed, and close to the many lakes and fantastic parks and trails that Anoka County has to offer. If I've learned anything about living here and from my neighbors, that they're the salt of the earth type of people and have a very independent spirit and don't necessarily prescribe to any particular party. I entered this race to provide a choice to the voters of this district. I entered this race to provide a choice for the independent-minded voter. I entered this race to offer a choice to the traditional Republican voter whose party has left them, a party that has drifted from the extreme views of a cult of personality and divisive rhetoric of unsubstantiated internet conspiracy. This does not reflect the majority and values of Minnesota. I entered this race to provide the preservation of women and individual rights to make their own decisions when it comes to medical decisions between an individual and their medical doctor. I entered this race to protect equality for everyone. The harmful, false information spread just this week by a gubernatorial candidate about kids in the LGBTQ community hits home to me. I have family, I have friends in this community. Our country, state, and district would not be what it is today without diversity. I entered this race because I believe that our
Thank you very much, Mr. Fisher. And now, Mr. Fisher, the next question that you received in advance goes to you to answer first. What are your goals for the future of House District 31B?
My immediate goals are to secure funding for our local towns that are in this district, to offset property taxes, and to gain money for infrastructure projects, particularly the much-needed improvements on Highway 65, not just for Blaine, but all the way through Isani. Highway 65 runs through the heart of this district and is important for commerce and transportation. Additionally, I would seek additional funds to help with Andover, even though it doesn't directly affect our district. We need to fix the contaminated wells there in Andover. Those are my top goals going in.
Thank you. Ms. Fisher, what are your goals for the future of House District 31B?
It's Ms. Scott, but
Ms.
that's
Scott.
okay. Thank you. Well, as mentioned, we do need to do some more improvements on Highway 65. It's a dangerous road, and so I would gladly work with state, county, local folks to put together funding for different projects along 65 for additional overpasses. But overall, as far as this area, I really would prefer that the locals have local control over what's happening in their own cities. As far as businesses in this district, I'd like to get rid of the statewide business property tax. We're one of a few states that do still tax that. Makes us uncompetitive, and it contributes to inflation. And as mentioned, I support permanent and meaningful tax relief for anybody that's paid taxes. Now that we have a $7 to $9 billion budget surplus, now's the time. People need more money in their pocketbooks right now, just to put gas in their car and food on their table. And we're looking at higher energy prices coming up too, so there's another strain on budgets. And our kids are a top priority. Even prior to the pandemic, our kids were falling behind. Anoka, Hennepin, in our school district, 63% of kids do math at grade level, 65% do reading at grade level. And even though that's higher than the statewide average, that's not good by any stretch of the imagination when we're leaving 35 to 40% of our kids behind. So I think we need to do something about that to improve education, empower parents to make decisions, and then of course we have to do something about crime.
Okay, Ms. Scott, the next question goes to you. And these are now the questions that we receive from the public. What personal traits do you have that make you well-suited for this office?
Thank you. I do have experience in the legislature, and I also was on the Andover Park and Rec Commission. I've lived in this community for 26 years. I helped get the funding for the cleanup of the hazardous waste pit in Andover, and I've offered the bonding bill and every single machination of the bonding bill to get the wells in Andover in the Red Oaks area, get that cleaned up, and get them city water. I work well with our city and county local officials, and you have to have those relationships in place to be able to be effective. Also, I'm just I have a lot of tenacity, and once I set my mind to something, I'm really focused on getting things done. So I think those are some of the qualifications or attributes that I have to help me do this job.
Mr. Fisher, what personal traits do you have that make you well suited for this office?
I bring real-world working experience. Throughout my career, I've had several stages working in small businesses, mid-sized businesses, working in the nonprofit sector, to my current position, working at the executive office level for a Minnesota-based Fortune 500 company, where I'm entrusted to make high-level decisions, yield creative solutions on an everyday basis to our customers, vendors, and business partners. In college, I was the vice president of the State Minnesota University Students Association, where I represented the interests of 65,000 students in St. Paul and in Washington, D.C. My proudest effort on that level was building coalitions and consensus to build, at that time, the largest public bonding project for a Minnesota State University. I'm a consensus builder. I'm not afraid to work with people that I disagree with, and I think I can use that to help make Minnesota a better place, and most of all, the citizens of this district.
Thank you. Mr. Fisher, the next question goes to you first. What is your opinion concerning the level of state, local government aid to the local governments of county, cities, and townships in House District 31B?
My opinion is that they're severely underfunded. From my understanding, there was money set aside before the session ended to help distribute money to those towns and cities in this district, and it's critically needed so that we can offset property taxes here in this district.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Scott? What is your opinion concerning the level of state, local government aid to the local governments of city, county, and townships?
Thank you for the question. LGA, local government aid, is a widely discussed topic at the legislature. Most of the cities in northern Anoka County are net losers on LGA. They pay in, that means they pay in more than they get back in benefit. And speaking with some of the folks that are elected to office in Ham Lake, they're like, we don't want anything from local government aid. We just would prefer not to be paying in since we don't get anything back. So most of the cities around here don't get a large amount, even if they do get something back with LGA. So it's an area that really needs to be tweaked at the state level. It was intended for cities that couldn't afford their own police or fire or those sorts of vital services to receive some help with that. Well, we still have Minneapolis, Duluth, Rochester, those kind of cities still receiving government aid, and that needs to stop.
Okay, now, Ms. Scott, again, for you to answer first. What government level has the primary responsibility for ensuring internet reliability and quality in House District 31B, and where will the funds come from for this level of government?
Well, there is all kinds of federal funding right now for internet services. It's just a matter of tapping into those resources. And I'm assuming that most of the local city and county governments are looking into getting some of those grants. It's a necessary service now. I mean, our kids and business have to have internet service, and the federal government and the state government have funded it quite sufficiently. And especially during COVID, there was even extra money put towards it because people were, struggling with bandwidth while they were trying to work and do school from home. So. I think that most of the city and county folks know how to apply for those resources, but if they have any questions in doing that, I'd be glad to help.
Mr. Fisher.
This is probably a topic that we're in agreement with. I believe that internet should be treated as a utility now. There is certainly a lot of federal dollars and state dollars that have been set aside to improve internet, and there's no reason in the next couple of years that every house in our district is hopefully hooked up to the fastest, most efficient broadband that's available.
Thank you. Mr. Fisher, for you to answer now. What is your position on a special legislative session to pass bills from the 2022 session before January 3rd, when the newly elected or re-elected candidates begins with a different session?
It sounds like a horrible idea. Unfortunately, there was a lot of important issues that were left on the table. Unfortunately, the other side walked away. People could have used that $1,000 to get through the inflation and the gas prices, but that ship has already sailed, and it's up to the new legislature to hash things out.
Ms. Scott, what?
Yeah, you don't need to repeat the question. I don't support a special session. By the time the elections are over, it's sort of a moot point. It's a 2 months, not even 2 months before we reconvene for the new legislative session. There's at least $7 billion budget surplus, and what the Walz administration wanted to give back to the people was a pittance, a small fraction of that. And I highly favor giving the majority, if not all of that surplus, back in the way of reduced taxes to anybody that pays taxes. The state government has been overcharging you, and you need more money in your pocket right now, again, just to put food on the table and gas in your car.
Okay. Thank you. And now, Ms. Scott, news reports indicate a volatile economy now and perhaps persisting. The small businesses are facing challenges as a consequence in House District 31B. Does state government have a responsibility to assist small business in challenging times, and if so, how?
Well, I mentioned one way already, and that's to get rid of the statewide business property tax. It makes us, again, uncompetitive, and it adds to inflation because businesses are going to pass those costs on down to the consumer. So the best thing that the state government can do, or any local government, any government on any level, is make a more favorable conditions for businesses to do business, to get out of their way and let them do what they do best, and that's supply a good or service and create jobs. So to the extent that government can roll back reasonable regulations, they should be doing that. Government needs to get out of the way in most cases. So that would be my answer to the question as far as what government should do for local and small businesses.
Mr. Fisher, do you want me to repeat the question?
I think I got it.
Okay.
Thank you. I think one of the challenges for small businesses and any business is healthcare. I would like to see programs created where small businesses can pool together, be able to buy at a group level so that they can discount the coverage and to be able to offer coverage for themselves and their employees. I think, too, that the state can provide either low-interest loans or maybe some kind of a grant program to keep businesses in this community, to allow them to expand. Small businesses are what keep small towns, districts going, and we need to support small businesses.
And now, Mr. Fisher, for you to answer first. Given the recent Supreme Court ruling regarding Roe v. Wade, state legislatures may be enacting new laws regarding women's reproductive health issues, including access to care. What measures, if any, do you think the Minnesota legislature should enact regarding women's reproductive health?
Well, first of all, I can't believe in the year 2022 that a 300-pound guy with a beard is the one supporting women's rights here tonight. I think we need to preserve that right and write it into our Constitution. A woman or any individual, healthcare decisions are between their doctor and themselves, period.
Well, I am proudly pro-life. I will always stand for the lives of the mom and the baby. There should always be an exception for the life of the mom. But the wider issue here is what the current law is in Minnesota right now, and it's what is extreme. Right now, there's no prohibition on abortion in the state of Minnesota up to and including birth. That is an extreme position. Abortion right now is what it's doing is trying to be the shiny object in the room to take the focus off of a horrible economy where food is up 10%, gas is up more than that. When Biden took over office, remember, gas was less than $2 a gallon. The other thing it's deterring from is the out-of-control crime in this city. And until the city of Minneapolis gets its act together, that is the economic driver of our state. We are in deep doo-doo. So abortion, I'm proudly pro-life.
Thank you. And Ms. Scott, I'm going to leave the serious subjects aside just briefly and ask what I intend to be a non-intrusive personal question. What did you do during your last vacation?
My last vacation was in Colorado. My in-laws have a cabin near Estes Park, and so I did some hiking and just enjoyed nature.
Mr. Fisher, what did you do?
I don't take I work a lot, so I don't take up many vacations, but one of the last ones is my fiance and our family, we went to the North Shore, do the typical North Shore things, visit Duluth. We're so lucky here in Minnesota to have so many opportunities and places to visit, so that's what we did.
Okay. Now, Mr. Fisher, let's get back to the heavy questions, and there's an intended wordplay in that statement, if you understand, in the next question. Do you have a position on legalizing recreational marijuana?
Yes, I fully support it. I am concerned on how the legalization for the edibles is passed. I think we need to put in comprehensive regulations for cities and municipalities to follow. The time is now to do it. We are missing out on new revenue streams. Conservative estimates show that Minnesota potentially could, very conservative estimates, $125 million back into our budgets. I have acquaintances that are in the business in Michigan, and in their first year of legalization, they're going to bring in almost $212 million of new revenue into their state. I support it.
Ms. Scott?
Thank you. I do not support the recreational legalization of marijuana. As I said, I was just vacationing in Colorado. We spend a lot of time in that state, and I've seen the issues on the streets of Denver. I didn't feel safe in daylight walking down the streets of Denver because of the homeless wandering around there. Everybody's smoking a joint out in public. It's really an uncomfortable feeling. Our law enforcement community here is not okay with it. There is no test that you can give somebody that's driving under, appears to be driving under the influence until there's a test where you can tell if someone is illegally driving a motor vehicle, operating a motor vehicle, driving a semi, any of those things. Until there's a test a sobriety roadside test, I can't support it.
Okay. And Ms. Scott, do you have a position concerning balancing the ever-present development pressure on the natural resources of water, plants, and animals, including insects. In other words, protecting, the ecology of the area.
Okay, not sure I exactly understand the question, but in the state of Minnesota, we have several entities that oversee the quality of water and look after, the DNR looks after endangered species and all of those things. Of course, we need to protect our water here in Minnesota, and I think that through science we can continue to do that. Nobody wants anything to happen to our precious natural resources here. And so I think we've done a lot and made strides, especially even in the ag community. They've made strides in making sure that there's not as much runoff and those sorts of things that is happening. Fewer applications to crops, all of those sorts of things. So I think there's always a balanced approach to that.
I think I understand the question too. Water quality, water levels are related to climate change. I just saw on the news this morning that the Mississippi River water levels are at a record low. I think people don't understand the commerce that's the barge traffic that contributes to inflation. That's our growers ship their food through the Mississippi River and gets sent to the market. It contributes to inflation. Anytime you talk about inflation, you also, at a 40-year high, you have to talk about corporations' profits at a 50-year high. So water quality is important. I live in a preserved water area in my backyard. Part of the reason that I chose where I live is I want to be a good steward to our land, and we need to do that. Keep our water environment clean.
Okay. And this will probably be the last question before closing statements. You've been talking to constituents as you campaign. You've received questions from the public through the League of Women Voters today. Is there a subject that you feel the public has not asked about that you feel is important enough to be raised? Mr. Fisher, that goes to you first.
That's kind of a tough one to think about on the spot. I've met so many great neighbors and had some great conversations, whether at a local festival or on a doorstep. And we've covered a lot of different topics. Nothing specific. We covered a lot here that, I know, like legalization, marijuana, things like that sometimes aren't always covered. The big ones, public safety, are addressed. I think we need to improve mental health. I think that's underrepresented. I'm very interested in some of the programs that local governments are using community mental crisis units, because often public safety, they're not just a criminal event, they're a mental health crisis, and we need to focus on that.
Ms. Scott, is there a question as you've campaigned that has not been raised that you think ought to be?
I think maybe a concern that is probably in the back of probably everybody's mind in here, but probably doesn't rise to the level of inflation or public safety, and that is just protecting your online privacy and what role government might have in that. I know one of my colleagues has a bill that addresses social media and how the algorithms target young girls, and it's causing them to develop eating disorders and those sorts of things. So, and as a person that plays in the pool a lot of data privacy and public transparency, there's a lot of catching up that government has to do to protect citizens' data. Now, we can't do that necessarily in every private sector area, but we certainly can do better as far as cybersecurity and those sorts of things from a state government level. And that's something that hasn't had a lot of time spent on it or resources, and it needs to have those resources. I was hearing just this week about a ransomware attack. So those are the kinds of things we're facing.
Okay, thank you. Now for your concluding statements, and this time Mr. Fisher will go first.
Thank you. Throughout this campaign, I've enjoyed meeting so many of my neighbors these past few months while either out door knocking or attending local festivals in Andover, Ham Lake, Linwood, East Bethel. Boasting about what already makes this area a great community to live in, and sharing ideas and visions for an even better future for the citizens of this community. This is a critical election. Rights that we have traditionally taken for granted will be decided in the chambers of the state legislature. It would be an honor to represent my neighbors and communities as your state representative. I humbly ask you for your support and for your vote between now and November 8th. For more information, please visit my Facebook page, Fisher for 31B, and I thank everyone here for attending and my opponent tonight. Thank you.
Ms. Scott?
Thank you. My name is Peggy Scott. I'm running for House District 31B, and I'm asking for your vote. I'm a 26-year resident of this district, and my husband and I raised our children here, our 2 grown children here, and we want this community to continue to thrive. I want to give you your money back. Now more than ever, you need more money in your pocket due to the high cost of inflation. Now's the time to give it back to you. Now is the time to make sure our streets are safe again. And now is the time to make sure all of our kids are performing at grade level or better. I'm asking for your vote, and you can get more information on my campaign at Peggy, the number 4 House. Peggy, the number 4 House.com. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates, for speaking to voters about issues and for running in the election for House District 31B. Thanks to our co-sponsor, the Ham Lake Area Chamber of Commerce, for organizing this forum. The Chamber and the League thank NorthMetro TV for their video production. Early voting has already begun and will continue until November 8th. If you are confused as to where to vote, whether you're registered or who the candidates are, you can go to minvotes.gov, and you'll find all that information that you need. Thank you for your attention tonight. Good night.